And South Korea's defense ministry says North Korea is likely to conduct its sixth nuclear test as well as more ICBM launches very soon. In a report submitted to the National Assembly, the ministry said Pyongyang was seeking to detonate a more powerful nuclear device and that its test site in Punggye-ri is in a state of constant readiness. The assessment was revealed during an emergency meeting of the Parliamentary Defense Committee convened after North Korea's second ICBM test on Friday. But Defense Minister Song Young-moo said it's still too early to determine whether Pyongyang is able to develop a nuclear warhead small enough to be mounted on a missile.
Breaking tonight, a frightening new reality settling over the country. More than 72 hours after nuclear-armed North Korea test fires yet another intercontinental ballistic missile, triggering an aggressive show of force by the U.S., scrambling two supersonic B-1 bombers over the Korean peninsula. U.S. security experts say the missile may reach as far as the east coast of the U.S., giving folks in San Francisco, Chicago, and New York City a little more than 30 minutes to brace for impact. Michael Malice is an expert on North Korea and author of Dear Reader, the unauthorized autobiography of Kim Jong-il. Michael, this has gone from being a theoretical exercise or thought to being something where I have people actually ask me, what are we doing? Is this going to happen? And what could we possibly do to prevent it?
Those are very complicated questions, obviously. So for a long time, North Korea has been threatening the U.S., saying they're going to wipe us off the map. They've been saying this since the 60s or 50s. Now, however, they have weapons that not only can reach us, but those weapons can do monumental harm and do it very, very quickly. Now, the question of what you do is, well, if you have someone pointing a huge gun at your head, just like in a holdup, you have very few options. And especially when this person knows, in the case of Kim Jong-un, if he loses his reins of power, he himself will probably personally be killed, just like Gaddafi did and just like Saddam Hussein did. So there's a huge incentive for him to do whatever it takes to maintain his stranglehold in this country.
Do you think, is it a surprise that they are this far along in the technology, or did we miss something, or did they just advance more quickly than we thought?
I mean, we try to reason with them and kind of bribe them, and they lie. They have no problem lying all the time. They disseminate constantly when they're attacked by the UN for having concentration camps. Their actual responses, we don't use that expression, so therefore we don't have any. So, I mean, they have no respect for diplomacy or anything like that, and they boast about it in their literature, which I read when writing my book, about how they're conniving and outwit everybody else. They're villains through and through.
So the president wants China to do more.
Right.
Will China do more, and what could they do?
We saw the president's frustration over Twitter. He's like, China's not doing anything. And also him complaining about...
In all caps.
Yeah, and also about complaining about Kim Jong-un. Why is this guy doing this? Does he have anything better to do with his life? There are certain things China can do. However, China does not want a U.S. ally in their border. China does not want 25 million North Korean refugees storming into Manchuria. And China kind of likes the fact that there's an American foil over there. And North Korea is also a source of cheap labor for China. So these are huge incentives for China to maintain the status quo. On the other hand, China doesn't want to be defending college-age students being killed for no reason.
And so do you think that China will step up? Like, what is the leverage point that we have?
So the one leverage point that we have that's kind of creeped out in the last week is if South Korea and Japan are saying we want nukes as well, China does not want nuclear proliferation on that peninsula and that area because those nukes could hit Beijing just as easily as they hit Pyongyang. However, this is trying to push one country to push another, and that's a very tricky hat trick to pull off.
What do you think about the new chief of staff at the White House? He is a military man, a four-star general, Marine.
Right.
Do you think that his leadership at the White House is good and necessary at this time when we're facing this kind of a threat?
Well, I think there's a plus and a minus. Military people tend to like military solutions. On the other hand, every single military person I've heard speaking from this White House has pointed out how catastrophic and disastrous a military option would be because you would have all those missiles, forget San Francisco or Washington, hitting Seoul, a city of, 10 million people, full of skyscrapers. It would be just a cataclysm like the movie Independence Day, but in real life. So I think a military guide knows how to do strategy, and this is a strategic approach and not a diplomatic one necessarily.
And then, so what are the push points on diplomacy that we're trying right now?
But we're not even speaking to North Korea, so it would have to go through...
Do you think we should? Would you advocate for direct talks?
Sure. I mean, I'd be up for trying anything as long as we're closing down the camps and letting these people leave the country and have access to the outside world.
All right. Michael Malice, author of Dear Reader, something fascinating to read.
Thank you, Dana.
It's getting more important every day.
South Korea and the U.S. are looking to complete the stationing of the THAAD anti-missile defense system on the Korean peninsula. This following North Korea's latest provocation. And President Moon Jae-in wants to triple the number of THAAD launchers from the current 2 to 6. Our Kim Hyun-bin starts us off.
Seoul and Washington have resumed discussions to swiftly deploy the U.S. Advanced Missile Defense System THAAD to the Seongju County, some 300 kilometers southeast of the capital. Defense Ministry spokesperson Moon Sang-gyun says the two countries will first decide when and how the deployment will take place.
We will discuss the deployment of the remaining launcher with the U.S. Once talks are complete, we will install the launchers.
Following Pyongyang's test firing of an ICBM last Friday, President Moon ordered the military to resume the deployment of THAAD, reversing his previous decision to suspend the deployment until an environmental assessment is carried out. A THAAD battery consists of 6 launchers, but only 2 launchers are currently operational in Seongju. President Moon said the other 4 will be deployed following discussions between the allies, though the timing is still undecided. The decision by South Korea and the U.S. to deploy THAAD was made last year amid the regime's continuous testing and enhancing of its nuclear and missile capabilities. Military experts say that the latest ICBM could reach the west coast of the United States. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And new spiraling tensions this weekend rattling the Asia-Pacific region. China showcased new military equipment following North Korea's launch of its second intercontinental ballistic missile. With these developments and strong words from Washington, the situation around the Korean peninsula is becoming more and more alarming. Here's RT correspondent Ashley Banks with more.
China's 2.3 million people Liberation Army showcased ballistic missiles, strategic nuclear missiles, and new aircraft during a massive military parade in Beijing on Sunday. The new aircraft included J-16 fighter jets and Y-20 heavy transport aircraft, both styles making their debut at the parade. The Army also showcased 3 sophisticated types of ballistic missiles, including ballistic missile Dongfeng 26. This missile has a 2,200-mile range and can be fired at a short notice and fitted with a nuclear warhead. Now, Dongfeng 21D, a land-based anti-ship ballistic missile, it's described as a carrier killer, sending an unpleasant signal to the U.S. And the Dongfeng 16G, which is a conventional missile designed for precision strikes against key enemy targets. This comes right after North Korea tested its second intercontinental ballistic missile. This time it flew straight up for about 45 minutes, reaching a height of 2,300 miles before crashing into the Sea of Japan. So far this year, North Korea has launched a total of 14 ballistic missiles. Experts say if the missile were launched on a normal trajectory, it could have possibly reached Chicago or even New York. After the launch, President Trump said in a statement, quote, "By threatening the world, these weapons and tests further isolate North Korea, weaken its economy, and deprive its people." North Korean President Kim Jong-un said, quote, "The latest tests proved our intercontinental ballistic rocket's reliability and a capacity to launch it in a surprise manner at any place and time. The U.S. mainland is within our striking range." Experts say this is alarming as North Korea continues to show technical progress. However, it is still unclear whether these missiles are capable of carrying nuclear warhead. Whatever the case with the complicated U.S.-China-North Korea triangle, the situation in the region is extremely volatile. In Washington, Ashley Banks, RT.
And Washington has signaled that it is ready to deploy the remaining launchers of the THAAD anti-missile system to South Korea in the wake of the increased threats coming from the north. Pentagon spokesman Jeff Davis told reporters on Monday that Washington is ready to bring additional pieces to South Korea as soon as possible, stressing that North Korea's repeated provocations prove the need for the U.S. missile defense system.
All right, well, in case you were looking for help from China in dealing with this North Korea situation, this shocking development from a foreign minister in China saying this is really the United States' fault and North Korea's fault, not their fault. The former commander of the USS Cole, Kirk Lippold. What did you think of that, Kirk?
That's a rich statement, to say the least, Neil. Clearly, China is the one that's aided and abetted North Korea in every single aspect of their nuclear program, from the financial backing, technical, all the things that have made that program possible. China is allowed. And for them to try and blame us, not
well,
buying
there's
it for 1 second.
There's got to be a method to it, right? They must be saying, bring it on, right? I mean, if you think that we're going to be able to move this guy, I'm talking to Kim Jong-un, we can or won't. So they're looking for a financial or trade war, or seem to be tempting us on it. What do we do?
Well, I think at this point, Neil, the time for incremental measures is over. The time for talk is over. And at this point in time, State Department needs to still be the lead agency and develop a comprehensive set of sanctions that have a breadth and depth on China. Absolutely on China.
How would you explain it to Americans? Because, you know, the fear in prior presidents has always been, would Americans be willing to accept markedly higher prices for goods or even higher interest rates if they start willy-nilly selling debt? Which I don't think they do, by the way, because it hurts them more than us. But are we ready to do that? And should the president explain that as a possibility?
I think that the American people, if threatened with nuclear weapons as a bargaining tool against the United States, is not going to tolerate that from any nation. Israel doesn't tolerate it from Iran, but the United States has never had this happen before. While nuclear weapons have been pointed at us, it's never been in a threatening manner in order to achieve international objectives. Right. That is what North Korea is attempting to do. And I think the American people are smart enough and intuitive enough to know that that cannot happen. And if that means that we need to buckle and tighten our belt and we need to do more with less as a nation because China is going to react to it, the American people will bond together, and I think they will be more than happy to see sanctions put in place against China if it means a safe and secure United States.
What did you think of the developments at the White House today, Colonel? I mean, General John Kelly make it pretty clear he is the chief of staff. All faces, parties, entities go through him to meet with the president. Even Anthony Scaramucci, a favorite of the president's, who's now out.
Finally, Marine order and discipline coming to the White House, and if he's going to be the throughput device that gets in to see the president, I think that you're going to begin to see a more integrated and comprehensive strategy come out of the White House, certainly better communications coming out of there. The leaks, I think, are going to stop because people are going to feel like right now, anyone working at the White House, their sole job is to focus on supporting one guy and one guy only, and that is the President of the United States. Anything other than that is a distraction. I'm glad to see that General Kelly is in there, and I'm glad to see that Trump is giving him the authority to start moving people around to do what's necessary so that the White House can focus on informing the American people about major issues like North Korea, especially when nuclear weapons are being pointed at us and threatened to us.
Very good point. Always good seeing Kirk Lippold, the former USS Cole commander.
Contrast to the heightened defensive posture, South Korea still plans to pursue dialogue with North Korea. It says the offer for military and Red Cross talks is still open. Unification Ministry spokesperson says a two-track approach of sanctions and talks remains in place despite the latest provocation. The ministry also says South Korea will remain patient and persistent when it comes to denuclearizing the peninsula to achieve peace and security. The initial proposed date for military talks had passed, and today is the proposed date for the Red Cross talks, but there's still no word from Pyongyang.
We will handle North Korea. That's word from President Trump today in that cabinet meeting. What's become a war of words over North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missile launch, the second in a month. Along with the talk, a show of force now from the U.S. military over the weekend. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Falcott has the story.
The Pentagon is now calling North Korea's latest launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile its longest test yet. And that activity is prompting a U.S. military response. Two nuclear-capable B-1 bombers escorted by Japanese and South Korean fighter jets flew from a U.S. base in Guam over the weekend to just south of the DMZ from North Korea, and successfully tested from a U.S. base in Alaska the anti-ballistic missile THAAD system set to be deployed in South Korea. Short of launching a war, important moves to defend against a nuclear North Korea threatening the U.S.
If we're not going to do that, we have got to focus on defense.
The actions of Kim Jong-un also triggering a global war of words. During his current European trip, Vice President Pence let go this salvo.
The era of strategic patience is over. The President of the United States is leading a coalition of nations to bring pressure to bear until that time that North Korea will permanently abandon its nuclear and ballistic missile program.
One of those nations threatened by North Korea's missiles is neighboring Japan. Following a phone conversation with President Trump today, Japanese Prime Minister Abe also banged the drum.
Under the strong unity of US and Japan, we will have a tangible action regarding military measures to improve our capability and take every caution in the face of North Korea's threat.
And as China rolled out its military might this weekend for the Army Day parade, it was also defending itself against charges it is not reining in North Korea. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, tweeted, "Done talking about North Korea. China is aware they must act. Japan and South Korea must increase pressure. Not only a U.S. problem, it will require an international solution."
We just hope that the other countries can see that they also need to take up their responsibilities in comprehensively implementing the relevant Security Council resolutions.
If it's any consolation, North Korea experts 38 North tell us that newly analyzed video of the nose cone of the ICBM shows it burning up, not surviving re-entry. From experience, however, the regime will no doubt keep on trying. Brett.
Greg, thank you.
The U.S. ambassador to the UN is warning that Washington is done talking about North Korea and a vital step towards is needed to address the issue. Nikki Haley said convening another emergency session on the UN Security Council holds no value unless it significantly raises international pressure on Pyongyang. She also added China must decide immediately on whether it'll commit to adopting a tougher stance and back U.S.-led sanctions on the regime. Beijing shot back on Monday with a Chinese envoy to the UN saying the onus is on Washington to reduce tensions on the Korean Peninsula. The U.S. government is said to be considering economic sanctions on China, and this comes as President Trump had criticized Beijing for not doing enough to solve the North Korea issue. But despite the regime's second ICBM launch in the space of a month, President Trump on Monday said his administration can handle the problem. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
President Trump has expressed confidence in Washington's ability to handle North Korea despite its repeated nuclear and missile provocations. Trump told his cabinet on Monday that his administration will handle Pyongyang, stressing that the United States can deal with anything. His apparent confidence in his administration's ability to handle the complex situation comes despite Pyongyang's second test launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile late last week. Trump's strong words are being read by some as a sign the U.S. is preparing to roll out tough new sanctions against the North. Citing government sources, U.S. media outlet Politico also reports that President Trump may be mulling over economic sanctions on China, Pyongyang's most important ally. Saying that various options, including trade restrictions, are being discussed, it added that the punitive measures could be introduced as early as this week. Talk of a so-called secondary boycott comes as President Trump tweeted last weekend that he's very disappointed at China for not doing more to rein in North Korea, while it has made billions of dollars trading with the United States. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.